Welcome to War Bios, where we delve into the most pivotal battles in history, dissecting the strategic decisions, tactical innovations, and human dramas that shaped the course of conflict. Today, we're heading to medieval Norway to explore one of the most fascinating and complex battles of the Viking Age, the Battle of Stiklestad. This clash of arms, fought on a sweltering summer day in 1030, would prove to be a turning point in Norwegian history, pitting the forces of King Olaf II Haraldsson against a coalition of rebel chieftains and peasants. As we embark on this journey through the tumultuous world of 11th century Norway, imagine the rugged landscape unfolding before us like a canvas of contrasts. The air was alive with the songs of birds and the rustling of leaves, yet beneath this serene facade, the country seethed with tension. Norway was then a patchwork of petty kingdoms, each ruled by powerful chieftains who owed allegiance to the king, but often pursued their own interests with ruthless abandon. King Olaf II, Haraldsson, also known as Saint Olaf, had ascended to the throne in 1015, determined to unify Norway under his rule and impose Christianity on its pagan population. His efforts were met with resistance from many chieftains, who saw his centralizing policies as a threat to their power and traditional way of life. The king's vision for a unified Norway was not merely a product of ambition, it was also driven by a deep-seated conviction that the country needed to be brought under a single, stable authority to survive in a treacherous world. One of the key figures opposing Olaf was the powerful chieftain Kalv Arnesson, who had once been a loyal supporter of the king but had grown disillusioned with his rule. Arnesson's defection was a significant blow to Olaf, as he controlled a large portion of western Norway and commanded a sizable army of seasoned warriors. These were not mere mercenaries. They were men bound by ties of loyalty, family, and tradition to their chieftain. Other notable chieftains, such as Thorir Hund and Kalv Arnesson, also joined the rebellion, bringing their own forces to the table. Each of these leaders had his own reasons for opposing Olaf, ranging from disagreements over policy to personal grievances. As tensions escalated, King Olaf II Haraldsson found himself facing a formidable coalition of enemies. Despite being outnumbered, he remained resolute in his determination to quell the rebellion and assert his authority over Norway. In the summer of 1030, Olaf's army, comprised of loyal warriors and mercenaries, began its march towards the rebel stronghold in central Norway. The journey was arduous, with steep mountain paths and treacherous river crossings testing the mettle of the king's men. The rebels, meanwhile, had chosen a strategic location to make their stand, the Valley of Stiklestad, nestled in the heart of Trøndelag. The terrain was favorable for defense, with steep hills and dense forests surrounding the valley, which would funnel Olaf's army into kill zones and negate their numerical superiority. As the two armies drew closer, the atmosphere grew increasingly tense, with both sides aware that the upcoming battle would be a fight to the finish. Scouts from each side engaged in a cat-and-mouse game, seeking to gather intelligence on the enemy's dispositions without being detected. As the two armies converged on the Valley of Stiklestad, the air was thick with anticipation, the very fate of Norway hanging precariously in the balance. The rebels, under the command of Kalv Arnesson and Thorir Hund, had chosen their defensive position with meticulous care, anchoring their flanks on the steep hills that rose up from the valley floor like sentinels. The dense forest surrounding the valley would funnel Olaf's army into kill zones, negating their numerical superiority and allowing the rebels to exploit the terrain to their advantage. On July 29, 1030, the day of the battle, the Norwegian summer sun beat down on the valley, casting a golden glow over the assembled armies. The atmosphere was heavy with tension as Olaf's army formed up in preparation for the impending clash. The king himself rode along the lines, his presence a beacon of hope and determination for his troops. His armor glinted in the sunlight, and his sword hung at his side, a symbol of his unwavering commitment to his cause. As the battle commenced, the sound of clashing steel echoed through the valley, accompanied by the cries of the wounded and the dying. The rebels, secure behind their defensive lines, unleashed a hail of arrows and spears upon Olaf's advancing troops. The king's men, undaunted by the withering fire, pressed forward with unyielding ferocity, their shields locked in a wall of protection as they sought to breach the rebel defenses. In the midst of this maelstrom, the heroic figure of Olaf Haraldsson stood tall, his bravery and leadership inspiring his troops to fight on against overwhelming odds. His warriors, fueled by their loyalty to their king and their determination to emerge victorious, launched a series of daring charges against the rebel lines. These attacks, though costly in terms of lives lost, began to erode the rebels' defenses, creating openings for the king's men to exploit. As the battle raged on, the outcome hung precariously in the balance. Olaf's army, though outnumbered, fought with a ferocity that belied their numerical disadvantage. The rebels, however, seemed to have the upper hand, their defensive position and superior numbers beginning to tell on the king's troops. The Valley of Stiklestad was a scene of unutterable carnage, the bodies of the fallen strewn across the battlefield like autumn leaves. In the chaos of battle, it is said that Olaf himself was struck down, his body falling to the ground as the rebels surged forward in triumph. Though his death was a devastating blow to his troops, they refused to yield, fighting on with a ferocity that belied their numerical disadvantage. The battle was far from over, as the king's men sought to avenge their fallen leader and secure victory against all odds. The hours that followed were a blur of bloodshed and chaos as the two armies clashed in a frenzy of steel and blood. The Valley of Stiklestad was a scene of unimaginable devastation, the cries of the wounded echoing through the hills as the battle raged on into the late afternoon. And yet, even in the midst of such carnage, there were moments of courage and honor that would be remembered for generations to come. As the sun began to set over the valley, casting long shadows across the battlefield, Olaf's army launched one final desperate assault against the rebel lines. The outcome was far from certain, as the two armies clashed in a frenzy of steel and blood. The king's men fought with every ounce of strength they possessed, driven by their loyalty to Olaf and their determination to emerge victorious. The night that followed was a time of darkness and uncertainty, as the two armies regrouped and reassessed their positions. The Valley of Stiklestad was a scene of unutterable devastation, the bodies of the fallen strewn across the battlefield like autumn leaves. And yet, even in the midst of such carnage, there were moments of courage and honor that would be remembered for generations to come. As the survivors of the battle tended to their wounded and buried their dead, they knew that the fate of Norway had been decided on the bloody fields of Stiklestad. The battle may have been lost, but the war was far from over. The legacy of Olaf Haraldsson, the king who had given his life for his country, would live on, inspiring generations to come. In the aftermath of the battle, as the dust settled and the silence fell, the true extent of the devastation became clear. The Valley of Stiklestad was a scene of utter desolation, the once green fields now trampled and stained with blood. The bodies of the fallen lay strewn across the battlefield, their faces frozen in death, their eyes staring sightlessly into the sky. As the survivors of the Battle of Stiklestad tended to their wounded and buried their dead, the reality of the situation began to set in like a shroud of sorrow. Olaf Haraldsson, the king who had given his life for his country, was truly gone. The rebel forces, led by Canute the Great, had emerged victorious, but at great cost. The air was heavy with the stench of death, and the silence was oppressive, punctuated only by the mournful cries of the bereaved. In the years that followed, Norway was absorbed into the Danish kingdom, with Canute's rule extending far beyond its borders like a dark shadow. However, the legacy of Olaf Haraldsson refused to fade, his martyrdom at Stiklestad sparking a wave of Christianization across Norway like a beacon of hope in the darkness. His followers and sympathizers worked tirelessly to spread the faith, often in secret, as they sought to keep the flame of resistance alive against the Danish occupation. The king's body was eventually moved to Nidaros, where it became a symbol of resistance against Danish rule and a beacon of hope for those seeking independence, its presence inspiring generations to come. As the centuries passed, the Battle of Stiklestad became an integral part of Norwegian folklore, with stories of Olaf's bravery and sacrifice inspiring generations to come. The site of the battle itself was transformed into a place of pilgrimage, with visitors flocking to pay their respects to the fallen king, leaving behind offerings and prayers in the hope of finding solace and strength. As Snorri Sturluson, the renowned Icelandic historian, once wrote, Olaf's death at Stiklestad was a blow from which Norway would never fully recover, yet it also marked the beginning of a new era, one in which the country would forge its own path and emerge stronger than ever before. The battle had become a touchstone for Norwegian identity, a reminder of the enduring power of courage and conviction in the face of overwhelming odds. The site of the battle has been preserved and now features a museum where visitors can learn about the events that unfolded on that fateful day, with exhibits and artifacts that bring the story to life. Each year, on July 29th, Norway commemorates the battle with a national holiday known as Olsak, which honors the memory of Olaf Haraldsson and his ultimate sacrifice. The celebrations are marked by somber reflection as well as joyous festivities, as Norwegians come together to remember their shared heritage and the bravery of their ancestors. The battle represents a microcosm of the human experience, with all its attendant struggles, triumphs, and tragedies. It serves as a poignant reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope, always a chance for redemption and forgiveness. In the context of military history, the Battle of Stiklestad offers valuable insights into the strategic and tactical decisions that shape the outcome of conflicts. The battle was a classic example of a defensive engagement, with Olaf's forces attempting to hold off the numerically superior Danish army. Despite being outnumbered, the Norwegian king's tactics were sound, using the terrain to his advantage and launching targeted counterattacks against the enemy. However, ultimately, it was the sheer weight of numbers that proved too much for the defenders, and they were forced to retreat. That's all for today's War Bios. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and until next time, I'm General Biography reminding you to keep marching toward victory.